Good evening and welcome to Across the Pitch. We're the soccer show for people who think that the North London Derby is a horse race.
Are you making these up yourself, mate? It sounds like they write themselves, to be honest with you.
Sometimes they kind of do.
I love that. It's a wonderful segue into tonight's show. Tonight, we will be talking about next weekend's matches, which includes a couple of delicious local derbies. We'll be talking more about that later. We're also going to be talking about the Europa League. We're going to be talking about your picks from last week. We're going to see how that went, Phil. And we're also going to be fielding some questions from some of our listeners. And I'm very excited about that, actually, because we actually have listeners, believe it or not.
Quite excited to have our first listener questions in, and thank you for those of you that have sent them in, and please send in more because we really enjoy hearing from you, and you'll make the show better by telling us what you want to hear about.
Absolutely, and even those ones that cussed us out, we still want to hear from you.
My name is Phil Kennedy.
And I'm Aaron Ayres.
Let's talk about the North London Derby and the Merseyside Derby that are coming up this weekend.
Hold on.
I know that you've spent the North London Derby and the Merseyside Derby.
All right. I'm not being rude about it, but it is the Merseyside Derby for the American listeners here. I mean, Mary's nice, but no, it's wrong. Mersey is actually, it's, as Phil, you actually educated me this earlier, it's the county which Liverpool is in. It's also the river which the Port of Liverpool sits upon, and it was a majestic port once upon a time. So you're a riverside derby, so it's the Merseyside Derby. The other one, of course, which we're very interested in is, well, personally, us, meaning you and I, Phil, are interested in, is the North London Derby. We're going to be talking about those ones later, but first off, we're going to be talking about the Champions League.
We talked about the Champions League last week a bit in our first episode. I told about what the Champions League was and how it's similar to the NCAA men's basketball tournament in a sense that you have various teams that qualify by either winning or doing well in their national league, and then they get to represent their league each following year in the Champions League. So, for instance, the top 4 teams in the English Premier League qualify for the following season's Champions League.
And the various leagues, based on their strengths, will have a similar number or less of teams qualifying as well. So basically, it's the best of the best.
There's 32 teams that make what's called the group stage of the competition, and it's a very similar format to the World Cup, and that in the early stages, you play within your group. One difference is that in the World Cup, you play each team in your group one time. In the Champions League, you play a home and away set against each team in your group. And then at the end of the group stage, the top 2 teams from each of the 8 groups will advance to the knockout round of 16.
Correct. And we're getting to the pointy end now of the Champions League. The groups are almost decided.
Yes, this was the 5th week of 6 group stages. Some teams have already clinched moving on to the round of 16. Out of the 4 English teams that are represented this year, which are Manchester City, Manchester United, Chelsea, and the Tottenham Hotspur, so far both Manchester teams have been able to advance to the round of 16 as they've clinched at least second place in their group. Tottenham has Barcelona coming up in their next matchup. They're looking at needing to get at least a draw to advance there, whereas Liverpool has a less difficult opponent coming up, but they're going to need to beat Napoli by at least
Napoli
2
and no
goals
bunnies
to
this
try
year.
and
Napoli, for those who don't know, that's Naples, and they're actually pretty good. Let me explain how good they are. They're in Group C. They're with, as we said, Liverpool, but also PSG and Red Star Belgrade. And even Red Star Belgrade aren't that bad. They've managed to get a win and a draw out of it. But Napoli is winning the group at the moment with PSG, who we spoke about last week from Paris, Paris Saint-Germain. they're one of our top teams. And Napoli have just sort of come out of nowhere and are leading that group. So Liverpool has a big task ahead of them.
I think that the Belgian superstar Dries Mertens has a lot to do with Napoli's rise this season. Let's actually talk about today's game, which was Liverpool against PSG.
What a cracking game. What a cracking game that was.
This was a matchup between some of the biggest stars of the world. You had, of course, Mo Salah and Kylian Mbappe,
Mane, Mbappe,
Neymar.
Neymar. How do we forget about Neymar? You know,
he's rolling around on the
he's
ground
hard
somewhere.
to miss, isn't he, when he's rolling around, isn't he? But he's a top quality player. I mean, here you are, 2-1 up against Liverpool. And he goes and absolutely skins. And by skins, I mean, like, he just, all right, it was basically a little bit of poetry in action. There's 90 minutes gone. I think there was 4 minutes of stoppage time. And PSG, to their credit, still attacking. And here he is down the Liverpool end, which is probably where they want to be with, 2-1 up. They've got a goal advantage. And he just jinxed this ball over the top of.
I believe that the announcers described that as a U kick.
A U kick, is that right?
I believe that's what they described it as. I think that was the terminology they used, was a U kick.
A U kick, okay. So that was a U kick over the top of Shaqiri, who is like, well, he's built like a brick shit house, this guy. You know?
Yeah, he's a big dude.
He's as wide as he is tall. He's enormous, this guy. And he's just basically got it, like, not just kicked it over his head, he's backheeled it over the top of his head and had a shot on goal. And that's audacious. You don't do that. You don't do that when you're trying to win a group game. You're trying to just wind the clock down. And here's Neymar going, oh, time for a bit of showmanship.
Yeah, that's something that most guys would only try at the training grounds.
Right, exactly. It was quite impressive. But anyway, yes. So Liverpool went down. They've got a bit of a problem in getting out of their group. It looks like.
The one thing that I would say is that there's certainly no shame in losing 2-1 to PSG at
home.
Paris, no less.
Yeah.
But it was really that last game that they lost in Belgrade to Red Star that's going to probably cost them advancing out of the round of 16. A team like Liverpool just has no business losing to Red Star.
Right. They don't. They should. They should dust them. They were lazy, I think, that day. But you know what's going to happen to Liverpool if they do get knocked out? They will go down to the Europa League. They will get automatic qualification into the next round of the Europa League. So we could well have 3 English teams vying for the Europa League title.
That would be quite interesting because we haven't really talked about the Europa League much, but I think that the easiest way to describe the Europa League is last week we had talked about how similar the Champions League is to the NCAA men's basketball tournament, whereas in that tournament the top teams from each conference like the Pac-10, the ACC, the Big East, etc., will each make the main tournament, which is kind of like the Champions League of college basketball.
Right.
And then there's also what's called the NIT, which is the National Invitational Tournament. And these are the teams that are not quite good enough to make the big dance, is what they call the NCAA tournament, but they're still good quality teams. So say, for instance, if you were to have the top 5 teams from the Pac-12 qualify for the NCAA tournament, then you would likely have maybe the 6th, 7th, and 8th place team would go to the NIT. The Europa League is similar in that the top 4 teams from the English Premier League each year, for instance, qualify for the Champions League, whereas the 5th place and sometimes 6th and 7th place teams will qualify for the Europa League. You can also qualify for the Europa League by winning what's called the Carabao or EFL Cup, which we'll talk about a little bit more later.
Yes.
But it's essentially an open competition for all of the league teams in England.
Now, fun fact, it doesn't necessarily... okay, before I go into that, you could also call it a Consolation Cup. And if I'm being a bit mean, it's true. It is a Consolation Cup. It's a little bit of silverware you can tuck away and go, yes, well, we didn't have a fruitless season this year. You know, here it is in the cabinet. Look, we were second best in Europe, all right? But it doesn't necessarily even have to be, and this is something that blows people's minds about the English Premier League and the various competitions they play across the year. One year, Millwall qualified for the Europa Cup, for the Europa League. Millwall. I believe they were runners-up in the FA Cup with Manchester United, and don't quote me on this. And because Manchester United already qualified for, of course, the Champions League, because they were good back then, Millwall automatically got that Europa League place as runners-up in the FA Cup. And I think at the time, they I not even think they were in the Championship. They may have been in League One, which is incredible.
Now you're mentioning the FA Cup, and
Right.
there's two different competitions. One is called the FA Cup, which is the Football Association Cup, and that's an actually open competition for the entire country. So what this basically means is that you don't even have to be affiliated with any league. My understanding is basically any team that has its own stadium is able to sign up for what's called the FA or Football Association Cup,
Correct.
or you might also hear it called the Emirates Cup because that's what it's sponsored by now.
Get out. I didn't know that. I thought the Emirates Cup was that bollocks pre-season thing they did at Arsenal. You know, they invite over a couple of teams. They play over a couple of a weekend. They play a couple of games each. They knock the ball about, and it's all happy
No,
days.
the FA Cup and the Emirates Cup are the same.
Well, okay, fine. I'm not calling it the Emirates Cup.
That's fine. I'm just telling that if people do hear somebody say the Emirates Cup, that's the same thing as the FA Cup. And then there's also the EFL Cup, which is the English Football League Cup.
Right.
This competition is only open to the 96 teams that are part of either the Premier League, EFL Championship League, League One, and League Two.
Right.
Now, the easiest way to explain this would be, for instance, in Major League Baseball in the United States, you have the Major League, which is your top level, AAA, which is the next level
Mhm.
below, AA below that, and then single A is your farm system. And of course, then you have independent league teams that are out there that aren't affiliated with any clubs. Any of those single A, double A, triple A, or major league teams, those are considered league teams. They're affiliated with the major league. The same way works in English football is that the Premier League, EFL Championship League, which is triple A, League One, which would be double A, and then League Two, which would be like single A, are all affiliated, and all of those teams can compete in the EFL Cup, which is only open to them. And this is another place where smaller teams can try to qualify for the Europa League. And in fact, in this year's EFL Cup, we're down to our final 16, or actually, I believe it's even 8 that we're down to at this point.
I think we're into the semi. No, we're into
Yeah,
the
we're
quarters.
down we're
Oh
down to
God, I'm
we're
gonna have
down
to look
to
at them.
8, and now out of the 8 teams that are left, 6 are Premier League teams, but there's 2 EFL Championship League teams left, which are Middlesbrough and Burton Albion, and they actually play each other in the upcoming round, which means that at least one EFL Championship is guaranteed to advance to the round of 4. Say that team were to go on and win their next 2 games, then they would win the EFL Cup and go to the Europa League next year.
Which is pretty impressive.
Oh, absolutely. That would be like if you had the Toledo Mud Hens playing against the Yankees.
Right. Yes, that's exactly what it is. But the FA Cup's a little bit different again now, isn't it, Phil? Because that's basically any team in England can potentially play a big league side, like your Manchester's, your Chelsea's, your Arsenal's, you know. So that'll be like, all right, I'll tell you what this is like. This would be like the across the pitch plonkers playing the New York Yankees, right? So the across the pitch is just a team I made up, provided we make we have enough players, provided we've got a suitable venue, and provided we pay the entry fee, we have the possibility of playing against the New York Yankees. It's not going to happen, but sometimes it throws up a couple of little surprises, the FA Cup, and you get what they call giant killers. And it's great fun to watch. It's so much fun to watch.
Now, one thing that I do think that it it merits mentioning is that in the early stages of the FA Cup, all of the small non-league teams play each other in kind of a qualifying tournament.
Correct.
And it's not until I believe like the fourth round of the group
Hmm.
stage till the Premier League teams come in. I believe that the League One teams come in the second phase, the League Two teams come in the third phase, the
Hmm.
Championship teams come in finally the
Oh,
Premier League team. So basically, if you're already in the Premier League, you have a bye until the fifth round, basically.
right. Right. Yes, correct. That's right.
That's just a little bit of background information about how the different tournaments in England work. And one of the things that you may hear announcers say a lot that might be difficult for American fans to understand is when you hear an announcer say something like, this team is undefeated in their past 10 matches across all leagues.
Right.
If you were talking about Major League Baseball, the New York Yankees, they only play Major League Baseball games. They don't play in multiple leagues at the same time. Whereas in English football, a team like Arsenal, for instance, right now they're playing in the Premier League, obviously. They're playing in the Europa League. And they're still in the EFL Cup, so they're currently playing in 3 leagues at once.
4, actually, if you count the FA Cup as well.
Yes, because that's actually starting up soon. So yes, come December, we're going to have many teams actually playing in 4 leagues at once. All the Champions League teams, assuming Liverpool and Tottenham advance. If they don't, then well, you said they would drop down to Europa.
Potentially, yeah. That's probably something for another night, and I'll tell you what, we'll talk about it probably later next month. You know, when the big problems start happening, especially with these teams that progress in the FA Cup and the Champions League and the Premier League, everyone wants to go for the treble or the quadruple. So the treble is winning 3 major trophies, whether that be the Premier League, the FA Cup, and the Champions League. That'd be the 3 major trophies, or the quadruple. I don't know if anyone's actually done the quadruple. Some have done the treble, some have done the double. Yes, Arsenal is one of those. But what happens is you start to get, you play a lot of games back to back across the week. So you might actually end up playing 3 games in the space of 7 days. That's where you start getting injuries. That's when players start getting tired, and that's when players start dropping out and performances drop across the board. So I will be discussing this later in another blog. It's fascinating, and we were discussing it today, Phil, about how, do you go for one league and go for the win, or do you have a good enough squad with enough depth that you can actually maybe beat the best teams in Europe and the best teams in England and whoever the hell gets through in the FA Cup?
I think that's exactly something that we were talking about earlier when we were talking about the 2 Manchester teams, for instance.
Mm.
It appears that Manchester City is very, very focused on winning the Premier League, where on the other hand, Manchester United, they've gotten off to such a bad start that they're probably not going to win the Premier League this year. So it really seems like they're focusing more on the Champions League. And it comes down to, when do you play your best players? For instance,
Right.
if you're Liverpool and you have a game against Red Star coming up on Wednesday, and then you have a game coming up against Manchester City in the Premier League on Saturday, you may rest some of your top players against Red Star, and that's how you end up losing a game to a.
Correct. That's exactly what happens. So it's a risky position for a manager to take. There's a lot more money in the Champions League, especially when you get into the later stages, than what there will be playing against the likes of
Cardiff City.
Cardiff. Yeah, exactly. Dead last in the league. So what do you do? I mean, I don't actually think the television rights comes into a manager's decision. What you're looking at is for the welfare of your players, and how can I get some sort of silverware to justify my position at the end of the year, at the end of the season? And you know what? Jose Mourinho's done it. He did it when Manchester United, which is why they're actually in there this year. Or was that last year?
That was last year. They're in this year because they finished second in the Premier League
Right.
last year.
Oh, yeah, that's right. They did too, didn't they? But the year before, that's right, the first year Jose Mourinho took over, he wanted to win the Europa League. So, he'd throw out the second-class team on the weekend, and they're still going to win because, you know what? Second-string Manchester United is still pretty damn good. But he would save his big guns for the Europa League matches, and that was his bet, and it paid off because next year they got into the Champions League.
Well, absolutely, and I think what you're saying about the silverware is a big thing. Where like you said, the managers aren't really thinking about TV money so much. Manager is thinking about how does he keep his job. And to me, at the end of the year, if a manager brings home a trophy, any trophy, whether it be the Europa, the Champions, Premier League, if you're bringing home a trophy, they're probably going to bring you back next year.
Yeah, you may not if you win the League Cup trophy, I'm just going to say. It's kind of a lesser trophy. If you had to go for it, fine, okay. Arsene Wenger, the great Arsene Wenger for Arsenal, always thought of that as like basically it was like a youth competition. I think he even said that one time. He's like, this is where I'm putting in my young squad so that they can play games, get minutes, and play quality opposition, for better or for worse. I don't think we ever won the League Cup under Arsene Wenger.
I think a lot of that really comes down to the manager himself. I mean, Arsene Wenger, being a French guy, probably doesn't give a crap about the EFL Cup. But if you take a guy like Mark Howe, maybe he would care more. I mean, obviously, in Bournemouth, they'd be thrilled to win the EFL Cup. But say Mark Howe took over Arsenal, for instance, he might care a little bit more being a British heritage.
It's Eddie Howe, by the way.
Oh, Mark Howe's a hockey player.
You know what? That's great. I'd leave that in, Phil, because that's just wonderful. That's like the American English sport thing happening there. But you're right. Not that they're in it this year, but Eddie Howe at Bournemouth, they're not going to win the league. They could probably squeak in for a Europa League position next year. But for example, your teams like Middlesbrough and Burton, lower league teams, this is big time for them. This is great. They love this league.
Oh, absolutely. They're a really interesting side to watch. I watched the last game that they played. There's a couple of interesting matches that are coming up in the English.
Interesting doesn't even begin to explain what's happening here, Phil. Seriously, 4 batches of players. This is seriously the biggest grudge match of the year for 4 different sets of fans. You have the Merseyside derby, which you spoke about before. That's between Liverpool FC and Everton. There's a golfing class these days. There's not a golfing class between the distance of these 2 teams. They basically have grounds either end of a park. You could probably go and have a nice leisurely jog and knock it out of breath between Anfield and Goodison Park. You can see them. I'm pretty sure they sit there on game days and they can look out over the stadium and say, oh, how are those guys going over there? Oh, yeah, okay, they're probably winning if you're an Everton fan because they're not going to win. So big rivalry there. That's called the Merseyside derby, as I said, because Liverpool sits on the Mersey River. But the other one, oh, wow. Now, this one's going to be a cracker of a match, isn't it, Phil? The North London derby. This is one of the highlights of the football calendar each year. What is the North London derby?
The North London Derby is, of course, with the Arsenal Gunners take on the hated Tottenham Hotspur. Now, these 2 stadiums are pretty close to each other, not quite the same as Liverfield and Anfield, or Anfield and Goodison, but about how far apart are the stadiums?
Well, right about now, not real close, to be honest with you, because
because Spurs are in Wimbledon.
Yeah, the Spurs are all the way up in Wembley. But generally, White Hart Lane and the Emirates is about 8 miles apart. That's not far.
That's what, about a 2-hour drive?
In London, yes, it is. Believe me, mate, I've done it. It's terrible. You're better off catching the train, catching the underground. You'll be there in like 10 minutes, easy. But anyway, yes, this is a storied rivalry. This goes back to the evolution of the game, actually, of the professional game, where, well, honestly, Arsenal were the team that encroached upon Tottenham's territory. Arsenal. This is probably a story for another day, but Arsenal started off at Woolwich Arsenal, which is where they kept the Arsenal for the British Navy. And they decided, well, we're not getting enough fans here, so we're going to relocate. And they did. And that wasn't so much of a problem. But when the top league back in the day, we're talking back in the day, back in the day.
1919 was where this all happened.
No, it was before that, wasn't it? We're talking like 1800s.
1919. So basically, from my understanding, is the story was that in 1919 there was a promotion available to the top league, and apparently Arsenal's owner at the time cut some sort of backwoods deal to get Arsenal in the league a year ahead of the Spurs, and that's where the hatred dates back to.
You're quite right, actually. Yep, and I should know that. I feel like I've failed as an Arsenal fan here. It's fascinating stuff, and you know what? That's all history. But this gets passed down. This is legend. This is lore, and this is part of the game that you can't quite explain until you actually get in it. Because I think this is probably one of the greatest things I love about football. It's not just what happens on the pitch; it's what happens around the pitch. It's the history of the game. It's the narrative. And I know I've spoken about this before. This is one of these rivalries, as the Americans say here, that really is a real sticking point and has good reasons for being as well. And so we come to modern era, the modern days, and during the Arsene Wenger years, it's fair to say that Arsenal had the stick, the wood. They beat Tottenham on a regular basis. That's changed somewhat in recent years. And we're going to be talking about that a little bit later with the question that we had. But Tottenham, it pains me to say it, being an Arsenal fan, they're not bad. They're not bad. They've got a lot of stuff happening right now, Tottenham. They've got a small squad. They can't spend much money. They've got an excellent manager. And
They're spending more than Arsenal now.
Well, they're spending a lot more on their stadium than Arsenal.
No, but on players too. Their payroll is $200 million more than Arsenal.
That's their payroll. Recent purchases from Arsenal have been a lot higher. Because Arsenal has just come out of the same sort of transition period that Tottenham's going through. Tottenham, for those of you that don't know, they're upgrading their stadium at White Hart Lane. That's their home. And it's going to be a pretty impressive stadium. Not as good as the Emirates, of course, but it's going to be pretty impressive. On the pitch, Tottenham are pretty bloody devastating at the moment, actually. They tore apart Chelsea on the weekend. Absolutely tore them apart.
That was some kind of show.
You know what? As much as I dislike Tottenham, I have to respect them for showing Chelsea how to play that game. Like, they just destroyed them. Respect, lads. I'm impressed with you lot.
Yeah, it was a 90-minute performance, and you can't really talk about the Spurs without talking about Harry Kane.
Harry Kane, yeah. Well, I tried to.
As much as I dislike the Spurs, you can't really dislike Harry Kane. I feel like he's the kind of guy that would be good to go have a beer at the pub with.
That's up to you, mate. I won't be joining him.
No, I'm just saying, like, so think about this. You think about all the great players and the top players, and you've got a guy like Ronaldo where they probably wheel him back to his garage at the end of the day.
Has the doors open for him? Yeah, sure, absolutely.
Harry Kane, he seems like a personable guy that probably knocks back a few pints.
You think so? All right, I'll let you have that. I don't. Okay, let me just tell you a little bit about Harry Kane. He made his first team debut for Tottenham in 2011. And he was their top scorer last year. In fact, I think he has been for the past 2 seasons. 2018 FIFA World Cup, he was the Golden Boot for England. Only the second player to do that after Gary Lineker. So he's a top quality striker. He is a striker. He's a forward. If you don't know what striker means, he's a forward. He's the guy you give the ball to put in the back of the net. Goals, I think, across the years, he's rapidly approaching some big name players in the league. He's 115 goals, I think, since he started playing the league in his senior career, which is pretty impressive. He's not been playing that long, and yeah, he's a good player.
He's really one of those guys that he's not the fastest guy on the pitch, but he seems to be there the right place
That
at the
takes
right
skill.
time. He got a very accurate and solid shot. He's the kind of guy that he had a goal where he struck from about 25 yards out
Yes.
in the Chelsea game. He's also one of those guys that really has good control of his header, and he was really impressive. And he, in my mind, is the main reason that England made it as far as they did
You
in
know
the World
what?
Cup.
I have had some information passed to me, a note has been passed to me across the desk here, Phil, that Harry Kane was actually part of the Arsenal Youth Academy.
I did not know that.
Yes, when he was 8 years old. He was released after one season for being a little chubby and not very athletic. And I'm saying bit chubby and very athletic in finger quotes here. And apparently Arsene Wenger laments that he didn't see the skill in the man or the boy when he was 8 years old. So, oh well, boo.
I mean, I guess you can't fault somebody for missing on an
Chubby 8 year
8-year-old.
old
I mean,
who couldn't run very fast. Anyway, we digress. Big match. Tottenham is in top form. Arsenal is a team in transition this year. They're rebuilding under a new coach. They show points of promise, I guess you will, moments of excellence, but by and large,
well,
uh,
I think that you could say a little bit more than the points of promise. These guys haven't lost a game since August.
yes, that's true. But you got to remember, though, that a lot of these games are against sides that they should win, and a lot of those games were pretty damn close for a lot of the match as well. They've been a little bit less than convincing.
Well, yeah, I would say the offense has definitely faltered over the past 4 or 5 matches. They were really firing on all cylinders there. I would say in October, and then in November they've struggled, but they've really been able. They've gotten some
Yep.
draws in some tough matches. They had a tough match against Liverpool. That was really, in my mind, maybe the best Premier League game I've watched all season in terms of
Yes.
both sides bringing
Yes.
their top game.
Yes. Absolutely. It'll be interesting to see because Unai Emery, the new coach, the new manager of Arsenal, he's been tinkering with the team.
He came over from PSG, right?
That's correct. Yes, he did. He's been tinkering with the Arsenal lineup, and I expect to see a full-blooded, full-strength Arsenal lineup this weekend. And I tell you what, if there's one game you watch this season, go ahead and watch the North London Derby, Arsenal versus Tottenham this weekend. And it's showing at, I think, 9 a.m. Eastern.
We'll be tweeting live on our Twitter handle, which is @AcrossPitch. We try to during all the games on Saturdays and Sundays. We'll try to have a few games each week that we tweet live during. The North London Derby will absolutely be one of those.
What are your picks for that game, Phil?
Well, for the North London Derby, I try to stay away from making picks on the Arsenal game because I'm going to pick Arsenal every time. In all seriousness, it's a game that really concerns me, especially the way that Tottenham
Yeah.
played last week.
Wow. Yeah. Against the top quality squad. Also, Chelsea is also in transition with the new manager as well, but played very well up until this point. But yes, so you're not going to do that. What do you think about the Merseyside derby then?
Well, I think that Liverpool should win it pretty easily on paper, but Liverpool, they still haven't dropped a Premier League match, so I guess you can't really say that they've been struggling because they haven't lost all year in the Premier League, but that they haven't quite looked as strong over the past few matches,
Correct.
especially like we said today, they had the draw, or no, they didn't have, they lost to PSG, which once again, no shame in that. They had the game against Red Star. Even last week, I mean, they ended up winning pretty handily, but in the first half, they weren't even doing that well against Watford, and easily could have been down to Watford in the first half before coming on with a strong second.
Yep, I agree. So here's what I'm going to say for those two matches, which are our two games of the week. I'm going to say it's going to be a 2-2 draw between Tottenham and Arsenal in the North London Derby, and it's going to be 2-zip Liverpool over Everton. Now, before we go on and field some questions from our fans, how did your picks go last weekend, Phil?
Well, the picks that I made last weekend, we'll put it this way: if you had bet $10 on each, you would have come out ahead 50 cents.
Well, that's
So
all right.
that's
That's better than kicking the
beats the
bucket.
hell out of losing. But I will say, Aaron, you were really on top of Fulham. I really thought that with as bad as Fulham had been playing, that a new coach being around for, what was it, 4 or 5 days
4
before the
days, I think.
match was
Yeah, yeah.
wasn't going to make much difference. So I thought that at plus 170 that Southampton was a nice bet, but Fulham ended up taking that one, so that was a loss. My pick of the week, however, which was the one I was most confident in, Derby County over Sheffield Wednesday at plus 105. That one ended up coming through, and if you put money on that one, then you were certainly a winner.
Very good, Phil. I am going to say that the new manager bounce, if you will, from a struggling club into a winning club is probably going to last 1 week. I don't know, because Fulham is now playing Chelsea this weekend, Sunday, 7 a.m. Eastern. As bad as Chelsea played last week, I get the feeling they've probably been raked over the coals a few times. They've been put in the stretcher. They've been given, hung, drawn, and quartered, and they're going to destroy Fulham. So that'll be the end of Fulham's winning run at 1.
Yeah, I think that Fulham is going to run into an angry hornet's nest this week. But one thing I will say is that Eden Hazard, he got off to a real strong start. He had a hat trick early, 7 goals, but then he struggled with some injuries, and the past few weeks he has not gotten on the scoreboard. I expect that he's going to get. This is going to be my big call of the week. I'm going to say that Eden Hazard is going to have at least 2 goals against Fulham coming up on Sunday.
Wow. Okay. And you did lament on the weekend that we haven't mentioned Eden Hazard. Eden Hazard is the powerhouse of Chelsea. He is quite the consummate player.
In my mind, if I was starting my own franchise and I could pick any player in the world to start with, I would pick him because, I mean, obviously you have Messi and Ronaldo, but they're both getting up in years.
Yep.
Hazard is only 27. He's still going into the prime of his career.
Mm-hmm.
And I also think he's the kind of player that makes the other guys around him. He's not just a striker that has to be scoring goals. He could just as easily be distributing the ball.
Yes.
He's a great dribbler, a great passer, and he also does very well at set pieces.
Yes, he does. He's an all-round player. He's an excellent player. Unlike your showboats Neymar, who is still rolling around on the pitch as we speak. All right. Phil, I think it's time for a couple of questions from our fans. What do you think?
I think that we should open up that mailbox.
All right, let's go and have a look. And our first fan mail is from Asia Miwiao. And he or she says, I don't know, bearskin, pornographic material, gore, or obscene lumber are prohibited to rights in addition to wisecracks, Phil. And then goes on to say no exclusions.
I think that's spam.
Oh, all right. Okay. Yeah, right. Okay, you're probably right. Oh, God, it's from Russia. Oh, okay. All right. Let's get out of here. All right. So the first real question of the night is from a young lad by the name of Ben. And he says, lads, some questions coming to you from fabulous Uralla, New South Wales. Enjoyed the show, and I'm putting 2 questions to you. First of all, what do we think of Tottenham? Second, we hear about Mbappe being the future of French football, etc. As an Aussie, who do we see as being the future of Australian football? And he goes on to say, obviously, we have no one at the same level as Mbappe, but there are some quality lads coming through, blah, 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 blah. There's another question in there. Talks about the MLS. Basically, he's having a good old rant here, but he's getting what he wants. So first off, Ben, I love you, mate. I know you. I actually know Ben well. He's a teacher. He's from my hometown. Lovely lad. He's an Arsenal fan. But he doesn't read very well. He's obviously not reading what we're putting down. In fact, I think he probably doesn't read it all. He's got all those Audible books out there. He gets told things and he does it because, mate, we're not talking about the A-League here. We're not talking about Australian football. Okay, we're talking about introducing Americans to the EPL. I happen to know that you know a lot about the EPL. But I am going to go back to your first question and say, his first question out of 3, even though he said 2. So he's not real good at math either, for that matter. What do we think of Tottenham? Well, we've spoken at length about Tottenham, and I think he wants me to say on air something that rhymes with Messerschmitt. And I'm not going to say that, mate, because you've heard what I've said, and I've got to say Tottenham are a quality side. And honestly, as Arsenal fans, which I know you are, Phil is, I am, we're a little bit worried about it, aren't we? Because they are looking damn good. And that's where I'm going to leave that question. Thank you, Phil, for your entry. No, Phil. Thank you, Ben. Thank you, Ben.
I was wondering about the Australian football question, and that made me think. In terms of an Australian football player, I always thought that a kangaroo would make a good centre back.
Well, they're called the Socceroos, and I'm pretty sure they're hoping that's what will happen. They can basically bounce around the pitch and kick a ball in the back of the net. Next question. And you know what? I like this question. This one's from Cindy, and Cindy says, my only question is, from a person who's very new to this sport, can there be a portion of interviewing from us, she's meaning, that brings a more serious note? Although I've enjoyed the easy conversation and depth of knowledge shared, I want dirt! Gritty, serious dirt segments. Otherwise, all of it was informative and amazing brain food. Cannot wait till the next one. Thank you, Cindy. I don't think either Phil nor I have been called particularly cerebral before, but thank you very much for that.
Thank you.
But I know where she's coming from here. We're not 60 minutes here, are we, Phil?
No, not at all. And I think one of the biggest things is that we're not one of these shows that's claiming that we're experts. We are more along the lines of saying, you know what, we love the game. We want to learn about it with our audience as much as anything else.
Absolutely, and have fun doing it. So, yeah, you know what? That interview with Scott Brown the other day probably started off a little bit seriously, but we had a lot of fun. And that's what it's about, The game's fun. And there's lots of anecdotes that you can share. There's shared experiences that you can have. And our love for the game hopefully shines through. We're not taking ourselves too seriously. We enjoy it. We laugh, don't we?
Absolutely. It's all about, I think that we want to talk about the positive things in the game, and certainly having a guy on like Scott Brown, who has had such a long career and battled adversity to get back to a point in his career where he's excelling again. Those are the types of stories that we're going to tell. We're not TMZ. We're not Der Spiegel. We're not going to be talking about what Ronaldo does in a hotel room. We're here to talk about what happens across the pitch.
We're not going to be talking about Lord Bentner beating up some
we
taxi
might talk
driver.
about that.
Maybe another night.
For those of you that don't know, Bentner was a former midfielder for Arsenal who's now playing in the Dutch league and is now serving, I believe it's 50 days in jail for a altercation with a taxi cab driver.
And he wasn't a very good midfielder for us. So was he a midfielder? Oh, I guess he's probably a forward midfielder. He just wasn't very good. He's quite unremarkable. And the Arsenal fans, they call him Lord Bentner, somewhat ironically. He's got an ego the size of, him, because he's quite tall. But he's just not very good. Phil, have you got a question?
So what you're saying is that the conversation with the cab driver likely involved the words, "Don't you know who I am?"
And the cab driver probably said, "Nah, mate, get out." But going back to Cindy, we like to keep it lighthearted. We're not the oracles on the game, and we like to have a bit of fun because it is fun.
If you want an episode on dirt, then we could certainly talk about field conditions in League 2.
Oh, boom tish! Where's your thing?
I can edit it in later.
But as once been said, football isn't a matter of life or death. It's much more important. So our last question tonight comes from TK. And speaking of Scott Brown, he asks, how many dark beers do I need to understand Scott? Oh God. Okay, so Scott, as he said, he's from a small town near Liverpool, and they have the Liverpool accent. It's called the Scouse accent. And you know what? I tell you what, I struggled with that accent when I was living in England. The Liverpool accent and the Newcastle accent, Newcastle upon Tyne, which they call Geordies over that end, basically was impenetrable. I couldn't understand a word they were saying, honestly. And it wasn't up until I had a boss by the name of Sean, and he was from Birkenhead, which is the other side of the River Mersey from the city of Liverpool. And he not only had this impenetrable Liverpool accent, he also had a stutter on top of it as well, which would get increasingly worse the more angry he got. And he was an angry man. So I had to learn that Scouse accent very, very quickly, just in case, was I in trouble or not here? I don't know. So, honestly, the beers won't help, but listening to it will. You just need to give it a bit of time and understand the cadence. So thank you for your question, TK.
All right, well, I think that that wraps up our listener questions here for the day. And so far today, we talked about the Champions League, the Europa League, and some of the other cups throughout England. We've also gone over the Arsenal and Tottenham matchup, Liverpool against Everton, and of course our listener questions. So I think that was about all we had on the list for today, unless you had anything else, Aaron.
All I have to say is if you haven't heard our most brilliant interview yet with Accrington Stanley midfielder, stalwart, if you will, Scott Brown, please do go give it a listen. He's a top bloke and a really good chat. Hopefully you can understand him. You can hear that interview at acrossthepitch.com/podcasts.
Absolutely. Please do check that one out. And once again, thank you, Scott, for coming on the show. And we really appreciate all of the time that you took to answer our questions. And we wish you luck at Accrington throughout the rest of the season. I will mention that Accrington, our team of the month, is unfortunately coming to an end for November. Although after losing their past 3 matchups, they may be happy that we're not going to be talking about them anymore. But we will be.
Oh God! I hope we haven't put the curse on them.
We will be announcing our new team of the month coming up on Friday, and hopefully have some other exciting announcements along with that. As always, thank you for joining us on Across the Pitch, and we'll talk with you again soon.